welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take these really complex systems, the systems that govern how we connect, how we work, even how we survive, and break them down into essential, actionable knowledge.
And our deep dive today is focused completely on empathy.
Right. And for so long, we've treated this quality as something soft, a pleasant virtue you either have or you don't.
But the truth is, empathy is a profound, demanding biological and psychological system. It's machinery.
And if that system isn't protected, if it doesn't have robust, assertive boundaries, it inevitably leads to exhaustion, to cynicism, and ultimately to self-destruction.
And this is so much more than just a self-help topic. This is a structural necessity, especially when you look at high-stress roles. Caregivers, nurses, doctors, therapists.
But really for anyone.
Exactly. For anyone in a personal or family life who constantly feels responsible for managing the emotional state of others.
Yeah.
The core tension we're going to explore today is this. How do you remain truly kind, supportive, and engaged without becoming a casualty of that connection?
Because that's the risk.
It's the whole risk.
Yeah.
What we've found is that true kindness requires tremendous self-compassion and clear, non-negotiable structure. We have to fundamentally reject this idea that being a good person means being endlessly available.
Because that pathway,
as you said, is the direct road to burnout.
So our mission for you, the learner, is to come out of this discussion with absolute clarity. We want you to understand the neurobiology of empathy, how it works, how it evolved, and most importantly, the practical strategies for harnessing its incredible power in every part of your life.
Your relationships, your career.
Your friendships, everything, without sacrificing your own well-being. This is all about sustainable connection.
Okay, so where do we start?
Okay, let's unpack this. When we talk about empathy, we're talking about something much richer and, frankly, more volatile than just simple sympathy or pity.
Absolutely. The scientific definition at its root describes empathy as the sharing of feelings or states of other persons.
Sharing.
Yes, a deep ability to actually perceive and understand another person's inner world. It's a kind of attunement.
Exactly. It's the mechanism of attunement. And when you talk to professionals, especially in these high-stakes roles, their intuitive grasp of empathy always translates into action.
What does that look like?
Well, they see the patient as a complete person, not just a diagnosis or a case file. They react appropriately to that person's individual needs, and they make sure their communication is clear and, human.
And when they do that?
Their job satisfaction goes through the roof because the work suddenly feels deeply meaningful.
That's a great starting point, but we have to make some crucial distinctions here. We need to start with what empathy isn't.
Right. We have to talk about its precursor stage.
Which is?
It's called emotional contagion. This is the most basic, automatic, simple sharing of feelings. It's blind. There is no conscious process involved at all.
Like contagious yawning?
That's the classic example. You see someone yawn, and you immediately feel the urge to yawn too.
Or in maternity ward. Right. One baby starts to cry, and then all the others, feeling that shared distress signal, just instinctively start crying as well. In that moment, you're sharing the state, but there is zero conscious awareness of where that feeling is coming from.
You're just mirroring, absorbing.
Yes, exactly. You're just absorbing.
Okay, so if emotional contagion is that automatic mirroring, what is the single crucial step that distinguishes it from genuine empathy?
The crucial step is the self-other distinction. This is the absolute pivot point.
A what?
Self-other distinction. Genuine empathy requires you to have a mature, robust concept of self and other.
So an I and a you.
An I and a you. It's the awareness on both an emotional and an intellectual level that the sadness or the joy or the distress you're feeling originated from the other person's state. It isn't purely your own feeling.
That awareness that we are separate, distinct, bounded beings.
That is the central characteristic. If you fail to maintain that distinction, you move from feeling with the person to simply drowning in their emotions.
And that, right there, is the beginning of the danger we're here to talk about.
That's the trap.
So that clarity lets us move into the two main types of empathy that psychologists and neurologists actually study. First, there's the immediate form, emotional empathy.
Right. Emotional empathy is that spontaneous, often involuntary, stirring or feeling of another person's emotion inside yourself. It's rapid, it's visceral, it's a social emotion triggered by being around others.
And this is what people like Carl Rogers were talking about.
Yes, the father of patient-centered discussion. He defined it as the ability to espouse the inner world of the patient as if it were your own.
As if.
But he included that incredibly important caveat. You must never lose the as-if quality. You can't lose yourself in their inner world, or you stop being a helpful external resource. Emotional empathy creates that immediate, powerful closeness.
But closeness isn't always enough. Not if the other person's experience is completely foreign to your own.
Which brings us to the second, more deliberate type, cognitive empathy.
Cognitive empathy.
This is a resource-intensive executive function. It's also known as perspective taking or using your theory of mind.
So this is less about feeling and more about thinking.
Much more. It's the ability to actively step into another person's mindset and their thoughts and to consciously know that their perspective, their information, their reality is different from your own.
So if I know something you don't.
Exactly. If I know you have a piece of information I don't, or you hold a belief I think is totally irrational, it requires cognitive empathy for me to understand how you're behaving based on your reality. It's rooted in intellectual understanding, not shared feeling.
And in the real world, you obviously need both working together.
You need them in tandem. Emotional empathy gives you that initial connection, that spontaneous drive to react.
But the cognitive side is essential when things get really complex.
It's vital, especially when the other person's state is just impossible to map onto your own life. If you're a clinician working with a patient who's experiencing profound delusions, you can't emotionally share that terrifying feeling.
Of course not.
But through cognitive empathy, you can still understand their perspective. You can understand how it must feel to hear voices or to genuinely believe a benign action is a murderous threat. Perspective taking provides crucial emotional distance. It allows you to move to an objective assessment and ultimately to effective help.
This distinction raises a fascinating and, frankly, a kind of concerning point about human nature. Does the ability to empathize, to share, or understand a state automatically mean we feel motivated to help?
That is the dividing line between empathy and morality. Empathy, by its scientific definition as just the sharing of states, is initially value neutral. The sheer ability to accurately understand someone's pain or fear does not automatically translate into a desire to alleviate it.
But it must increase the chances.
Oh, it certainly increases the readiness to help, absolutely. But for it to actually lead to helping behavior, empathy has to undergo a conversion. It has to become what we call pro-social motivation.
So empathy is the raw tool. And pro-social motivation, which I guess we'd call compassion or sympathy in everyday language, that's the intent to use the tool for good.
Exactly right. And this conversion is so crucial because if we skip it, that's where we see some of the most destructive and cold human behavior.
How so?
Well, think about dysfunctional relationships, particularly those involving partners with narcissistic or manipulative tendencies. That partner can be extremely highly attuned to the other person's emotional states.
The great at reading people.
They exhibit intense empathy, especially cognitive empathy, but then they use that exact perfect knowledge to manipulate, to control, or to hurt the other person. Not to help them. They know exactly which buttons to press.
Wow.
So that proves definitively that the distinction is real. Empathy is the mechanism of understanding. Pro-social motivation is what determines how that mechanism gets deployed.
Okay, so let's shift our focus a bit. Let's look at the origins of this system. It's amazing to realize that the foundations for empathy begin, literally at birth.
They do. The foundational readiness is there from the moment we enter the world. Newborns are incredibly receptive to the emotions and expressions around them.
We see that immediate, primitive emotional contagion we were talking about.
The synchronized crying in the nursery, yes. We also see pure imitation. If a parent sticks their tongue out, the baby tries to imitate it. These automatic responses are the initial rehearsals for the more complex social skills that come later.
But the key to true empathy is getting beyond those automatic responses. It's establishing a self-concept. What's the timeline for that?
That critical development, the awareness of I, as distinct from you, happens between 18 and 24 months of age.
And there's a test for this, right?
There is. The most celebrated and universally applied test to confirm this milestone is the Rouge test, the mirror self-recognition test.
It sounds so simple, but it's really profound. Can you walk us through why this test is so important for mapping the development of the self?
Of course. It is simple, but it's a profound measure. A mark, like a little spot of rouge or lipstick, is placed subtly on the child's forehead without them noticing.
Okay.
Then they're placed in front of a mirror. Now, if the child is pre-self-concept, they might just interact with the reflection like it's another kid. They'll touch the reflection's nose, maybe babble at it.
But if they've developed a self-concept,
They will look at the reflection, recognize that the image is them, and then they'll reach up and touch the mark on their own forehead.
Because they know that's me.
Exactly. Passing the test proves self-recognition, which requires the underlying concept of the self as a unique, bounded entity.
And the timing here is everything.
It's everything. There's this deeply fascinating coincidence. Children start showing the very first signs of emotional empathy understanding, that others can have feelings that are different from their own around the very same time they pass the Rouge test.
So the development of empathy seems to be intrinsically linked to the development of the self.
It strongly, robustly suggests that. Without the self, you can't recognize the other.
And cognitive empathy, the more intellectual kind, that comes later.
Yes, it trails behind. The cognitive side, understanding that another person has different thoughts and knowledge, that fuller development of our theory of mind, that develops much later, usually between ages 4 and 5.
And that's when a kid can start telling a convincing lie.
Exactly. They understand, if I secretly hide mom's keys, mom won't know where they are, even though I do. That requires abstract, intellectual perspective taking.
So if we zoom out from the individual, we see empathy also has these deep evolutionary roots in our mammalian past.
That's right. The most accepted theory is that empathy and these pro-social behaviors first evolved from fundamental parental care behaviors.
It makes sense.
Caring for your young ensures their survival and propagates the species. It's a huge evolutionary advantage. And humans were often described as being born in a state of physiological premature birth.
We're so helpless for so long.
Exactly. Highly underdeveloped and reliant on caregivers. This necessity for extended high-investment care pretty much requires the rapid development of strong empathic bonds. And that original protective bond just broadened over time.
From the mother-child pair to the wider group.
Precisely. To the whole social group, facilitating cooperation, collective defense, social bonding, all vital for early tribal survival.
So our modern instinct to cry out in distress is a holdover from that.
It's a remnant of that fundamental functional signaling system. And of course, culturally, the development of complex language just simplified everything, allowing us to verbally share and validate our internal emotional states.
Now let's get into the most modern, fascinating part of this, what is actually happening in the brain. Thanks to fMRI, we can literally see the mechanics of connection.
The fMRI studies over the last couple decades have been revolutionary. They confirm that the idea of I feel your pain is neurologically accurate, at least for emotional empathy.
So it's not a metaphor.
It is not a metaphor. When we see another person experiencing a painful stimulus, say watching a video of a hand getting a mild electric shock or a needle poke, the same brain regions that process our own pain are activated.
Which regions are those?
Areas like the anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. The brain isn't just observing, it's literally sharing the physical sensation.
So it's not just an intellectual recognition of pain, it is a shared physiological resonance.
Absolutely. And importantly, this neural overlap isn't just for suffering. The same thing happens with positive emotions. Studies where you watch someone else win points in a game or receive money show overlapping activity in your own brain's reward circuits. We are hardwired to share both suffering and joy.
But this leads us right back to the central dilemma of self-preservation, especially for people in intense environments where suffering is constant.
Right.
If a professional's brain is constantly firing its own pain circuits every time they see distress, they burn out in weeks. What happens to the brain of, say, an ICU nurse or an oncologist over time?
This is where we see a remarkable and crucial neural adaptation. It's a protective mechanism. Constant exposure to the pain of others actually changes the brain's response patterns.
How?
For medical staff who are frequently administering painful treatments, like nurses giving injections all day, the brain undergoes a shift. The areas associated with pure emotional empathy are suppressed.
Turned down.
Yes, they're turned down by the activation of higher cortical control areas, parts of the prefrontal cortex, and at the same time, the areas related to cognitive empathy are activated instead.
So in essence, the brain learns to switch modes. Instead of running the program that says, I feel your pain, it runs the one that says, I understand your pain, and I need to solve this problem objectively.
Precisely. It's a neurological shift towards objective assessment. The staff are moving from shared feeling to detached, actionable understanding. This neural suppression of emotional resonance is the brain's elegant way of ensuring self-protection and maintaining functionality.
So it's not a sign of coldness.
Not at all. It's a sign of functional resilience.
That neurological deep dive really shows that empathy is a highly functional system,
Right.
not just some pleasant personality trait. And when empathy is applied correctly in professional settings, The clinical results are not just qualitative, they are measurable. This is way more than just good bedside manner.
It's so true. The positive effects on patients are compellingly documented. For instance, in some general health studies, patients with flu-like illnesses who reported that their care staff were highly empathic saw the duration of their symptoms shorten.
By how much?
By a measurable, statistically significant margin 1 full day. That's a physiological change resulting directly from an emotional interaction.
Wow. And it goes even deeper than that, right? Down to the immune system itself.
Yes. There was a stunning discovery with lung cancer patients. Researchers tracked the patient's perceived empathy from their nurses and correlated that with markers of cellular immunity.
And what did they find?
They found that the higher the perceived empathy from the nurses, the greater the number of B and NT cells, key components that contribute directly to the body's cellular immune response.
So the feeling of being seen and cared for literally helps the body heal.
It mitigates stress and seems to bolster immune function. And beyond that, patients who feel seen are far more open about their full medical history, and critically, they're much more likely to stick to their medication and treatment plans.
And when you look at the big picture, the metadata, the correlation is just overwhelming.
It's incredibly strong. Systematic reviews confirm an 81% correlation between staff empathy and positive patient clinical outcomes. That's treatment success.
81%.
And the correlation with patient satisfaction is even higher. 84% with the staff, 82% with the facility. This is why empathy is in the economic interest of healthcare institutions. It improves success rates, shortens stays, and significantly reduces malpractice claims.
The necessity is undeniable, yet the reality on the ground is so often the opposite. Patients routinely report a lack of empathy, which leads to these profoundly traumatic experiences that were completely avoidable.
It is a critical systemic failing. We examined several anonymized cases that just starkly illustrate the cost of this empathy deficit.
Let's start with a really foundational moment, the experience of birth.
In one account, a woman described the difficult birth of her first child. She felt her emotional needs were completely ignored. When she expressed profound fear about the process, the staff just dismissed her with cliches.
That's just how labor is.
Exactly, offering no real reassurance. Then, when medical interventions began, they were just initiated without explanation or consent. She described feeling like a passive object, treated like a cow.
Horrible.
And this fundamental lack of empathic communication led to a severe sense of isolation and violation. It profoundly restricted her ability to emotionally bond with her own son for the first few months of his life. The trauma wasn't the physical pain, it was the psychological abandonment.
That's a violation of dignity. And how does this manifest in the high-pressure world of teaching hospitals?
Well, consider the mother giving birth in a major teaching hospital. For the residents there, the birth was treated purely as a fascinating surgical procedure, a teaching moment.
The focus was exclusively medical.
Completely. Her pain, her exhaustion, her evident emotional distress were all ignored in favor of technical discussion. She felt so humiliated and stripped of her personhood that she initially refused to hold her newborn son.
And when she expressed that distress,
Rather than being met with understanding, she was met with reprimands. She was told to get it together. It just shows a systemic failure to grasp that medical instruction has to be balanced with human care.
and sometimes the failure of empathy is just
Yeah.
a profound lack of respect for basic human dignity.
There was a third case, a patient in a large outpatient clinic for routine exams. She was given a standard open-backed examination gown.
Okay.
And then she was told to walk to the examination room, which inexplicably required her to cross the entire public entrance lobby.
In an open gown.
Yes. When she protested, saying she felt exposed and violated, the staff told her she was making a fuss and wasting time. It was just policy. She immediately left, refused treatment, and started a lawsuit that drew negative media attention.
Just a total failure of perspective taking. And finally, there's a case that really shows the power of validated experience, even when the physical outcome is terrible.
This is the story of a Mr. S who had severe debilitating pain and vision loss after an eye procedure. He rushed to the first clinic, and the staff failed him completely.
How?
They were unempathic, telling him his complication was unheard of, unprecedented, and they even subtly blamed him for it. He felt utterly alienated and just spiraled. Then he found a second clinic. Their approach was radically different.
They validated it.
Immediately, they validated his experience, explained that while the complication was rare, it was a known risk. They assured him they would do everything possible, even providing comfort and preparing him for the possible loss of his eye.
Which he did lose.
The eye couldn't be saved, but the staff empathetically prepared him for the loss while constantly highlighting the function of his good eye. He was discharged, physiologically stable, and mentally resilient. It showed that while medicine couldn't fix the organ, empathy healed the person.
The evidence is just overwhelming, and the cost of failure is immense. So why does this empathy deficit persist? Why is this happening despite all the evidence that empathy is beneficial and healing and even economically sound?
There are a few interlocking reasons. First, there's a fundamental training gap. Historically, empathy was neglected in professional curricula. And troublingly, some long-term studies have shown that empathy can actually decrease during medical education.
It gets trained out of them.
The old model prioritized an authoritarian, emotionally distant approach, but that is completely outdated. Modern practice demands that clinicians bring the patient into the boat, discussing options, seeking consensus, motivating them.
But you always hear that time and staffing shortages are the real culprits.
And look, those limitations are undeniably real. They are. But they can't be the entire explanation. We have to understand that a helpful, effective, empathic conversation, one grounded in what are called the Rogerian principles.
Empathy, acceptance, and genuineness.
Right. A conversation like that does not inherently take more time than one lacking empathy. It's about the quality of the interaction, not the duration. A hurried yet validated interaction is infinitely more helpful than a long, dismissive one.
And finally, there's a factor we might overlook: the toxic social environment itself.
Empathy is a learned behavior, and crucially, it can be unlearned or eroded. It's heavily shaped by social learning.
Even in adults.
Especially then. Researchers have shown that if you watch other people reacting to pain in either an empathic or a non-empathic way, your own subsequent empathy ratings change. Your brain activity can shift.
So a non-empathic work environment will just erode staff empathy over time.
Systematically, they unlearn the skill just by observing the behavior that the system rewards or tolerates.
So empathy is this powerful, essential tool for connection. But now we have to turn to the core of the dilemma, its shadow side. What happens when this drive to connect and feel and give is deployed without any boundaries?
That's when we see chronic stress responses that ultimately destroy the caregiver.
The acute ones being...
The acute responses are things like compassion fatigue and secondary traumatic stress. Compassion fatigue is when a caregiver feels overwhelmed, helpless, even angry in the face of suffering, and it leads to emotional distancing. Secondary traumatic stress is the distress that comes from frequent contact with trauma victims, where the professional starts experiencing trauma symptoms themselves.
And these acute responses eventually feed into that slow-motion chronic disaster that we call burnout.
Precisely. Burnout, as defined by the WHO, is an occupational phenomenon from poorly managed chronic workplace stress. It's characterized by 3 states. 1, overwhelming exhaustion. 2, increased mental distancing or cynicism about your job. And 3, reduced professional effectiveness.
And the statistics are bad.
They're terrifying. Studies of medical students and residents show that the percentage reporting high symptoms of burnout frequently ranges between 40% and a staggering 60.3%.
Faced with this, many highly empathic people adopt these chronic behavioral patterns that look like kindness, but they're really self-destructive survival strategies. The first one is people-pleasing.
People-pleasing is a deeply ingrained, learned behavior. It's not a formal disorder, but it is a crippling mechanism. It's driven primarily by an excessive, almost paralyzing fear of rejection and an intense avoidance of conflict.
Harmony at any cost.
At any cost. People-pleasers constantly suppress their own genuine needs. They often use very specific language like saying, "it was my fault," when it clearly wasn't, or habitually deferring with, "I'm not sure, what do you think?" They struggle severely, even physically, to say the single word no.
And where does this behavior come from?
It's nearly always rooted in childhood experiences where love and affection were conditional on compliance. You were praised for being the good one, the compliant one. This leads to deeply low self-esteem where you rely almost solely on external validation to feel worthy.
So you become an expert in empathy, but you use it predictively.
Yes, to anticipate and preempt the needs of others, guaranteeing that approval hit you need to feel safe.
This need for external validation can escalate even further into what's sometimes called the helper syndrome.
The helper syndrome, or helper syndrome, is when the act of helping becomes an end in itself. The helper becomes psychologically dependent on helping others to feel valuable and purposeful.
And the negative impact on the helper is huge.
Immense. They neglect their own health, they push their boundaries until they feel exploited, they might take drastic actions like loaning large sums of money, and because their actions are driven by this profound need for acknowledgement, when that validation doesn't come,
They crash.
they experience intense disappointment and frustration. It's a vicious cycle of self-sacrifice and then resentment.
And you mentioned this syndrome actually harms the person being helped just as much.
It does, profoundly. It inadvertently creates an unhealthy codependency. The helper, often unconsciously, keeps the recipient dependent. They rush in to solve the problem, preventing the person from developing their own self-help skills and autonomy.
So the recipient never really grows, and the helper always has a source of validation.
It's a toxic loop.
So what's the neurochemical trap here? What's fueling this obsessive need to give, even to the point of self-harm?
It's the brain's reward system. It's the dopamine loop. When you help someone, especially when you get praise, your brain releases dopamine. The helper's high.
Right.
Now, if your core self-worth was conditional when you were growing up, your brain gets wired to chase that dopamine hit of approval at all costs. This creates an addiction cycle where you confuse constant self-sacrifice with safety or love. You end up pouring from an empty cup.
Your life looks noble on the outside, but feels hollow inside.
Hollow, exhausted, and fundamentally unsafe.
And this chronic behavior is often seen as a specific type of trauma response.
Yes, the trauma response we call fawning. Fawning is a survival strategy, often disguised as excessive kindness. If you grew up in a stressful or unpredictable environment, your brain learned that the fastest route to safety was by pleasing the authority figure.
So pleasing others becomes a reflexive survival strategy.
An automatic one. And this constant self-abandonment for the sake of external safety is what creates that quiet simmering of resentment underneath the smile, the exhaustion, the frustration, the bitterness. Those are the critical, ignored warning signs that your mind and body are sending you.
A warning that your essential needs have been abandoned for too long.
For way too long.
And finally, let's look at the most controlling and destructive version of this pattern, often seen in romantic relationships. Codependency.
Codependency is characterized by an almost total psychological and emotional focus on the partner's well-being and satisfaction, even if meeting their needs means violating your own core values or isolating yourself from friends and family. The primary driver, again, is the paralyzing fear of rejection or loss.
And what does that look like day to day?
It looks like avoiding disharmony at all costs, never raising a complaint, always agreeing. It's the inability to make any significant decision without the partner's input. It's only feeling good about yourself when the partner is happy. You're highly controlled by their perceived expectations.
And tragically, the controlling partner in this dynamic often uses specific manipulative tools to keep the codependent person trapped.
Yes, psychologically violent and corrosive behaviors. We need to name them. The first is the silent treatment.
The refusal of communication.
And an immediate signal of rejection. It psychologically says, you behave badly, I am rejecting you, you are worthless. It exploits the codependent's deepest fear of abandonment.
And the second tool is perhaps the most destructive to one's sense of reality.
That is gaslighting. Gaslighting is the conscious, persistent manipulation designed to make the victim question their own reality, their sanity, their guilt. The controlling partner will deny events that clearly happened, blame the victim for things they didn't do, or make them doubt their own memories.
And this is often coupled with isolation.
Yes, by speaking poorly of their friends or family, ensuring the victim loses their external support network and relies solely on the manipulator for their version of reality.
And the ultimate psychological weapon.
Explicit threats of separation or other painful consequences if the partner doesn't comply. The codependent partner avoids anything that might trigger the partner's negative emotions, all in the name of love, but really, in the name of desperate survival. This shows us why sustainable empathy requires fierce self-protection.
Okay, the sources have laid the dilemma bare. Empathy is essential, but if it's misused, it becomes a blueprint for your own self-destruction. The question now is, how do we build resilience? How do we practice sustainable kindness?
The foundational shift is moving toward self-compassion, or Mitgefühl für das Selbst. And this is not self-indulgence. It is the disciplined path to resilience and the primary defense against compassion fatigue.
And this is a concept rooted in Buddhist philosophy, but now fully validated by Western psychology.
Absolutely. It provides concrete tools for internal stability.
It's defined by three core components: The first is self-kindness.
Self-kindness means actively choosing to treat yourself with understanding and warmth during difficult times, in the exact same way you would treat a cherished friend.
So you replace that harsh, critical inner voice.
The one that says, "You loser, you failed again," you replace it with gentle understanding. And this is fundamentally different from high self-esteem. Self-esteem is often comparative, I'm better than others, and pressure-inducing. Self-kindness is non-comparative. It's about accepting and appreciating yourself fully, weaknesses included.
The second component pulls us out of that isolation of failure. Sense of common humanity.
This is the acknowledgement that pain, failure, struggle, and imperfection are universal human experiences. When you fail, the inner critic isolates you, makes you feel unique in your misery. Common humanity connects you to the whole of the human condition.
Realizing I am not alone in this.
Suffering is part of being human, and that realization makes failure so much easier to accept and process. It removes the shame.
And the third component, which gets a bit diluted in wellness culture but has a precise function here, mindfulness.
Mindfulness, or Achtsamkeit, is the non-judgmental observation of the present moment, including the painful emotions that arise. The key is to achieve perspective.
How so?
Think of it like sitting on the bank of a river. The river flows by, and sometimes a heavy, painful log floats past. That log is an emotion, like anxiety or resentment. You practice watching it pass neutrally without jumping on the log and floating away with it,
We're trying to push it under.
or suppressing it or judging it. By maintaining that neutral perspective, you stop yourself from escalating difficult emotions into catastrophic thought patterns. You maintain internal calm.
And this isn't just about emotional stability. It has measurable physical benefits.
Absolutely. Studies show that a consistent practice of self-compassion reduces stress hormones, specifically lowering cortisol levels. It increases emotional resilience, and, counterintuitively to the inner critic, it can actually increase motivation.
Because failure is easier to accept.
So you're more willing to try again. This practice of self-care is central. It's the ability to maintain a loving, appreciative relationship with yourself, actively recognizing and respecting your own needs, getting enough sleep, having hobbies, maintaining a work-life balance.
So if self-care is the baseline, how do we build the active skill set of resilience?
Resilience is the ability to adapt successfully to adversity and bounce back. To build it, you need a reliable system for handling daily stress. A supportive social environment is key. You have to be able to talk openly about work stress with trusted colleagues or friends.
And there are specific methods we can use.
Yes, concrete, daily methods like the 3 good things method.
That sounds interesting. How does that work in practice?
Every day, you take a moment, usually before bed, to name 3 specific good things that happened, however small. But here is the critical self-efficacy building step. You must then reflect deeply on your own role in creating those moments.
So it's not just that a good thing happened, but that I contributed to it.
Did you plan it? Did you react effectively? Did you communicate clearly? This simple reframing technique actively shifts your focus away from what you lack and toward positive experiences. It strengthens your belief that you can create positive outcomes in your life.
The core battle for people pleasers, as we discussed, is that crushing inner critic. We have to learn to silence it, or at least radically diminish its power.
That critical voice comes from those deep-seated negative beliefs from childhood. The fear-based scripts like, you must adapt to be liked. It enforces impossibly high standards using harsh, generalizing language like, you'll never succeed.
So the goal isn't to eliminate the voice, but to neutralize its influence. What's the cognitive reframing tool for that?
Well, the insight from cognitive behavioral therapy is that this critical voice is merely a collection of old fears and ingrained beliefs. We have to accept the fears are present, but consciously choose not to give them the weight of objective truth.
And the key to freedom here is
Assertiveness. Being assertive, and this is not the same as being aggressive, means expressing your own needs, feelings, and boundaries clearly, calmly, and respectfully. You use I statements, I need more time to think about this, and set non-negotiable time limits. I can help for 30 minutes, but then I have a hard stop.
This is where the art of saying no comes in. For the people pleaser, this feels like an act of relational violence.
It feels terrifying because it activates that deep-seated fear of rejection. But we have to understand that saying no to a request is actually saying a powerful yes to yourself. It's saying yes to your energy, your self-respect, your boundaries.
And this has to be practiced in steps.
Absolutely. You have to train that no muscle.
So what are those practical steps?
First, you identify the limiting beliefs. I'm responsible for everyone's happiness. Then you practice simple, clear phrases. I have no capacity for that right now, or that truly doesn't fit my priorities this week. Don't over-explain.
Start small.
Incredibly small, saying no to an unimportant favor. And if the boundary is challenged, which it often will be by people used to your compliance, you remain calm, you repeat your boundary once, and you absolutely avoid over-explaining or justifying. The boundary stands on its own.
Finally, let's bring it back to communication structure, especially in these high-stakes interactions. Even nonverbal empathy needs structure to be sustainable. There's a great acronym for this, EMPATHY.
Right. This model offers practical, deliberate, nonverbal steps for structured communication.
Okay, E stands for eye contact.
Fundamental. Maintaining comfortable, steady eye contact helps the other person feel perceived. It is the foundation of a trustworthy working relationship.
M is for muscles of facial expression.
Your facial expressions have to convey genuine, deeper concern. You can practice mirroring expressions to enhance your perceived empathy, which makes the other person feel validated without you saying a word.
P is for posture.
You need to establish physical openness. Maintain eye level. Don't hover over someone. Lean slightly forward with your arms uncrossed to signal openness and receptivity.
A is for affect.
This is the deliberate step of assessing and validating the other person's emotional state, asking about it, paying close, non-judgmental attention. When their emotional state is named and validated, they feel less nervous.
T is for tone of voice.
Always speak in a friendly, concerned, and measured tone. It's crucial to avoid a controlling or overly technical tone.
H is for hearing the whole patient.
This means listening for the unsaid. Pay attention to their nonverbal cues, their body language, the full context of their life. Don't just wait for your turn to speak. Seek to understand their complete narrative.
And finally, Y is for your response.
This is the most critical self-protection step. You take a deliberate pause before you react. This moment of reflection allows your higher cognitive control areas to find the most appropriate and empathic position, especially in situations that might trigger irritation or anger in you.
So you avoid that knee-jerk reaction.
You avoid the purely emotional reaction. Curiosity and reflection in that pause are key.
We have completed a crucial journey today. We define the complex reality of empathy, separating that spontaneous sharing of emotional contagion from the deliberate, resilient work of cognitive perspective-taking.
We traced its deep roots in evolution and neuroscience, recognizing its indispensable, measurable clinical power to heal.
And most importantly, we learned the crucial signs of self-destruction, the danger zones like compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, and those insidious behavioral patterns of people-pleasing and codependency.
Where that neurochemical need for external validation just completely overrides self-preservation.
The final hard-won insight from this entire deep dive is this. You are not unkind for setting limits. You are simply learning to relate to the world and others without abandoning yourself in the process. You're moving from self-sacrifice to sustainable kindness.
And the knowledge takeaway is profound and simple. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. The true depth and longevity of your compassion for others can only be sustained if you first apply that same tenderness, structure, and respect, that self-compassion, to yourself.
If you constantly feel drained, exhausted, or resentful,
You have been trying to pour from an empty cup for too long.
So here's our provocative closing thought for you to consider this week. If your fundamental sense of self-worth depends entirely on your endless kindness, your constant availability, and your ability to solve everyone else's problems, are you truly giving freely, or are you just surviving? The deepest work we can undertake is to find the balance where your profound ability to connect with others actually, finally, includes the most important person in the room.